Nokia announced at AutoCon one open source project Kubenet. Kubenet uses Kubernetes as a platform to deliver network automation.
Excited to be on stage here, right? So, and the feedback in general, I was also in AutoCon 0, by the way, and all in all, I think probably many people didn't know Nokia a lot in these conferences, and I believe the fact that we open source Container Lab and that we open source our images so that everybody can freely consume them has been seen as a very positive move from us, right? So the question is, do you want to get more of these or not, right? What do you think? Should we do more of this or not? All right. I'll go a little bit to a journey, right? So network automation is one of our strategic pillars, right? As a vendor, right? Because we want to make our systems consumable, but actually we want you to succeed in your journey, right? So in other words, if we try to hinder you, we basically do something wrong, right? And my boss, who is actually over there, right? He asked me a couple of years ago, he said, okay, what should we do in network automation, right? Because we actually did it from the beginning, right? So people who know us from 5620 SAM and NSP, so we actually had network automation from the start. And some people where we were talking to, we came up with a UI on top of an IP network, and they said, okay, I don't want that, I want CLI, right? And so in the meantime, time moved on, and I came up with these 4 pillars that I believed we should actually focus upon, right? So the first one is make it consumable, right? I'm a practical guy, right? I want to play with stuff, and if I know it works, I will say, okay, it's good, right? And so what I'm talking about consumability, it's about getting access to everybody on your laptop. So from being small to potentially very big customers that we have, right? So it should scale in and scale out to all different flavors of implementations, right? But also easy to access and easy to extend and easy to maintain, right? Because it's nice to build it one time, but you have to keep it going, right? And then the second thing was basically predictability, because it's nice to get it to work, right? Or to get it implemented or configured, but actually does it really work, right? Because the question is always, it's nice to automate something, and does it continue to work? Because it's not a one-shot thing, it's a continuous thing, right? And then, of course, and I think you see many people have talked about it, is the collaboration side of things, is that you actually should have an audit trail, or you have to have version control, and should be able to do that automation in a collaborative way. And then, of course, the fourth one is today you cannot talk anything about without talking about AI. So the assisted play is another one. So I see AI as an assistant, right? So it's a buddy that we use, and that buddy makes us more efficient going along, right? That's how I see AI. Now, I'm a personal guy, I'm a practical guy, so it's nice to be a theory. I actually built this stuff myself, right? And during that journey, actually Marcus is sitting over there, is one of the guys in my team. Actually, I built it myself, and the first attempt, it worked, but I asked him, okay, how does it look like? Give me an example, because he's actually more of a software development type. If you look at my history, I'm a network designer. And he said, if I'm honest, because I'm his boss, he said, it's ugly. So in other words, I think what I've learned through that journey is that making this thing work, whether you are consuming it or doing it yourself, right? Or basically customizing a vendor implementation, or we as a vendor giving it to you, we have to do this in a way that we can maintain it and that the life cycle of it is easy, right? That's for me one of the big lessons learned that I did in my journey, right? And actually, this is going to be an interesting. I ended up leveraging Kubernetes as the platform to do network automation, right? And why did I end up there? Is I said, if I want to achieve those requirements, building all of that myself, why should I do that, right? And what I saw during the journey, so I was lucky that I have been able to figure out and play with many different things, because I also started with Ansible and Python and Terraform and all that stuff, right? If you see all the industries using, and not all, most of the industries leveraging Kubernetes as a platform for automation, then I said, why can networking not do the same? That was basically my direction that I was going. So, and the first thing, it's also a fun story, is actually, I listened to a podcast while I was running, so I'm actually a running type of guy, and I learned a podcast about operators. And they said, okay, that's the new thing, that was a hot thing in 5-6 years ago. And the first attempt that I did is, okay, can I use an operator pattern in Kubernetes? So I don't know whether people understand that, but basically it's the reconciliation loop that you have in Kubernetes. Can I actually use that and interact with a physical device, right? Because everybody of you thinks that Kubernetes is only about containers. I can, or I'm going to prove you right now that it's actually not. So that's why I try to do a demo, I try to do a live demo, but I decided not to do so, advised by the organizers. So basically, what I built is a network, right? So just a very simple thing, set up with Container Lab. And what I'll show you is basically, so what you see, I apply a configuration. So kubectl, this is the CR that I apply to the network. So basically, I configure on two sides, two routers, IP addresses, and this will actually configure EVPN VXLAN. And what you see at the bottom is actually the real implementation on the real device, that it actually works, and it's actually reconciling the whole thing. It does from orchestration to resource allocation to building an abstract device model, making a vendor-specific implementation, all the way down to transacting to the device. So the full stack from orchestration to automation. And so when you listen to all the presentation and stuff like that, I believe this gives us, or Dinesh would call it probably, or classify it in tool 2.0, right? So we are here, and this is basically showing us here. So we decided a new initiative from Nokia, which is actually open source, which is called Kubenet. So I'm very excited to announce that we are launching Kubenet. And the initiative is actually not to give you a product, but actually it's an initiative where we try to learn people who are interested and educate them on the usage of Kubernetes for network automation. So with that, I hope you like that initiative. So if you want to know the details, there is a Discord server where you can join, right? There is a learn.kubenet.dev, which actually gives you a bunch of exercises where people can go through, and so our goal is, and I would love people to join us and help in the organization, because this should not be a pure Nokia initiative, if I'm honest. But the idea is to help people and train them to potentially get to this level of network automation and leverage that across the board. So with that, I would like to thank you, and I'm on time.
After the announcement from the AutoCon 1 stage, I dug into a few details of Kubenet with Wim Hendricks.
So Wim, Nokia's announced Kubenet. Why use Kubernetes as an automation platform? It's a complex kind of a platform. What is it bringing to the table?
So first of all, the reason we did it is because many other industries we see are adopting it. So in other words, we don't want networking to be left behind.
Yeah.
Secondly, I agree with you that the step inside of Kubernetes can be high, but the reason of Kubenet is actually to help the automation community to understand and learn what Kubernetes is about and what it could bring onto the table for network automation.
So I think of Kubernetes as a platform that basically brings containers to life. It's a container lifecycle management tool is how I think of it. Is that how Kubenet is operating? Are we still dealing with containers, or is it doing something else here?
So at its core, it's not focused on that, right? Although, so what we have done is we have extended the APIs of Kubernetes with networking constructs, as I call it, or networking APIs.
Okay.
And there is various flavors of those, right? So there is abstract APIs, and there is device-specific APIs, and there is like network design APIs.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So, so I should think of Kubenet not as I traditionally think of Kubernetes, something that is container lifecycle management. I need to think of it as a platform that now, instead of delivering containers, it's delivering network artifacts.
Correct. Yeah. So in other words,
Okay.
if you instantiate that networking construct that I was showing on stage,
Yeah.
right? Actually, that is triggering an application that we wrote inside of Kubenet, and that is basically eventually going to give a configuration to a device based on the intent or based on the APIs that you actually instantiated. So the big difference is instead of instantiating a pod, we are configuring something on a networking device.
Okay. So if I was wanting to instantiate a pod, I would write a YAML file that's got the various characteristics of the pod, where out of the Docker repo I want to pull an image, and whether it's a replica set or whatever. Now would I be defining a YAML file that describes a network device or something?
What you do, what I showed on the stage is I created an abstract API, right? So we have two sets of APIs. We have an API that can go straight to the device, which is one-to-one device transaction.
Okay.
But instead of spinning a pod, we configure something on the network device.
Yeah.
Right. And we also created an abstract API that basically then fetches the topology that networking construct is about and figures out which network devices are involved in that topology. And it will actually configure each and every one with the specific parameters that are needed with your intent that you configured.
So you mentioned from the stage EVPN VXLAN. So
Yes.
would that be an example?
Correct. So the network design configuration that you put inside, for example, says this network supports EVPN VXLAN.
Okay.
You could also define the network design to be another construct like segment routing.
Okay.
And what the operator or the software of Kubenet does, based on the abstract network definition, it figures out the network design that is applicable for that topology, and then figures out the specific parameters that are needed for each and every device to accommodate for that intent that you instantiate.
Okay, so Kubenet also knows about what switches and routers I have on the network.
Yeah.
And therefore then what configuration parameters are required to bring this network service request to life.
Correct. So one of the things that we did, so that is discovery component, right? So when you build the topology, so in Kubenet as the demo, what you see is you import container lab as a topology because we are building a lab.
Yeah.
Out of that, we understand the topology of the network and we discover devices that are instantiated, for example, through container lab. And as a result, we know which version they have, which parameters they have, right? What configuration they have, right? And then when you instantiate that network construct, there is a continuous reconciliation loop which we inherit from the Kubernetes thing that is going to create a diff between the running config and the intended config and keeps that always in sync.
Okay. There's a lot there, Wim. There is a lot there. There are entire products that are built around all of those concepts.
Correct.
So Kubenet is what then? Is this open source I get for free?
Yeah, so we open sourced this because I do agree with you 100%. There's a lot that is covered here because we actually go from orchestration to automation, right? To actually instantiating. And what we wanted to do is, I think if you look to the network automation community so far, we are on the road of more Python scripting and stuff like that. This is really orchestration and automation together. And so we decided that we have to share and share our experience and bring more people up to speed about the potential of Kubernetes. So Kubenet is about instantiating that 100% open source with the idea to actually help the community, the network automation community, to be educated around this artifact.
So this is coming from Nokia. So for today, what is my vendor support? Just like Nokia running SR Linux, that kind of thing? Is there multi-vendor?
So the platform supports multi-vendor, although I have only implemented the templates for Azure Linux at the moment. I have been talking on the conference with other vendors, so we are going to integrate other vendors to get other vendors on board.
Okay.
Because, if we can inherit or embed other vendors, I think it creates more value for the industry.
So Wim, if I want to run this because I'm a lab enthusiast, can I do that? Is this a big system? Can I run it on my laptop or?
Yeah, so Kubenet. So I'm a big fan of having everybody access, right? So what we did in Kubenet is you can instantiate it on your laptop, very small footprint. There is one dependency that you have is that Container Lab typically requires x86, and that's not because of Container Lab, because the NOSes of the
Yes.
vendors are only supported that. But you just need 16 gig of RAM, a few CPUs, and it actually runs.
Okay. So no big deal there. If I wanted to run it in production, what might that look like?
So you probably need a scaled out Kubernetes cluster. So you need a quorum for the
Yep.
database. And then it depends on how many systems you have. But typically the footprint, I've tested with a few hundred boxes with a 16 gig RAM of CPU. So it's very small.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about Container Lab. I mean, if I want to use Kubenet to configure my production network, actual physical boxes, I could do that too?
Yes, yeah. Because it's for us, whether we talk to a container, a virtual machine, or a physical system, it doesn't matter.
It's all the same. You mentioned DVPN VXLAN as one of the applications here. What would it take for me to define a different sort of a service?
Okay, so that is depending on your education level, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that we did not focus upon is because when I talked on stage, I'm of the opinion that it should be easily consumable, extensible, and maintainable, right?
Right.
So in other words, right now it is written in Go. I have a technology that that's also open source already, but it's not fully integrated yet, where you actually build a Terraform-alike experience to actually execute that. And with that, it's actually more configuration as data approach rather than writing real code. But the nice thing, in my view, is that you could run Ansible playbooks, Terraform, Python, Go, whatever you choose to implement. So it's also flexible.
That makes sense because you said Kubenet, think of it as an orchestrator. So if it's an orchestrator, that means I can summon whatever configuration automation tooling I want to actually bring the change to life.
Correct. And that's, in my view, also another nice thing about Kubernetes is that running an Ansible playbook that you already have in place to actually run that is coming from the community. We, as Kubenet, didn't do anything for that. You see, so that's why leveraging that whole ecosystem from Kubernetes, you get a lot of things for free that we don't have to develop. But coming back to your question about extending that, it depends a little bit on the level of expertise that you have. What is also, I think, interesting is Kubenet will also learn you to define APIs.
Okay.
Because in order to control who has access to what and who can instantiate what, having an API-based system gives you more control and more programmatic capabilities.
Because I can gate at the API what calls people are allowed to make and so on based on their authentication context.
Yeah, and you can build a data model. For example, let's say the network configuration, what I call the network config, did not have, let's say, segment routing in it yet. Then you just have to extend the API. So people will learn also how to do so. But coming back to your question originally is that people might not have had the skills. So what we are trying to accomplish also with Kubenet is having people understand how to do that extension or even build their own APIs and then do that instantiation for their specific environment that they need.
Well, it also feels like it would be a natural extension to have an ecosystem where people could contribute things that they've built and other people could consume those.
Correct. So if you look at our ambition for Kubenet, we did the first step. I'm hoping that other vendors and suppliers or even operators contribute. So that this is completely set up as an open source initiative. So we are actually hoping that many people start to contribute and help, right? We, of course, probably need to explain at the first step what we did and how it works. But then I'm expecting other people to chime in to help and help run the system.
Do I need to know Kubernetes before I can really run this thing?
No. And that's why if you go to learn kubenet.dev, actually what I did is I built a few exercises which you can execute on your laptop, on your PC, right? And you actually go and build from Container Lab, building the topology, importing the topology, discovering the devices, all the way up to configuring networks. And then the last step is integrating that with GitOps, such that it's not just what you see in the demo right now is I transact straight to the device, but a lot of people want to see that configuration stored in Git, figure out what the hell is going on, if it's okay, see the diffs, and then Once they are happy with the change, then they transact to the device. There is also exercises to do so. So our real goal is to learn. We believe the first step that we have to achieve is have people understand how it works or how you can consume.
Yeah.
And then we go into how does it work? And then we go, how can they extend and stuff like that, right?
Got it. So learn.kubenet.dev, you said. So then kubenet.dev, if I want to download the project and find out all the core information?
Yeah, so learn kubenet.dev gives you how to install, do the exercises and run all the software.
And of course, you mentioned there's a Discord server.
Correct, yeah. There's Discord, we have a YouTube. The YouTube at the moment is empty, but we are planning to add some videos and instructions and so on to have a video-based representation of the content.
Excellent. Well, it's a great contribution to the community. Thanks, Wim.
Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate it.
If you're interested in Kubenet, head over to learn.kubenet.dev to find out more.